Excuse me, ladies and gentlemen, I let time get away from me by a couple of minutes, but we will go ahead and call this meeting to order. It is 6:32. This is the meeting of the Alpharetta City Council for November 30th, 2020. If you will, please stand if you can and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I will note for the record that all members of council are present and accounted for this evening. And before we get started on the agenda, I'll note for those of you who just may have shown up for old business item PH-2016, Unified Development Code text amendments, stormwater and floodplain management, we have deferred that. Staff asked to defer that, so there could be some changes in that document, and we wouldn't have had time to get it to the public, and we wanted to make sure and give plenty of notice for anyone who may want to review that before we vote on it for the second time. So that item will not be heard tonight and will be deferred until December 14th, the last meeting of the year. Other than that, we'll go ahead and move on to the consent agenda, and the consent agenda consists of the council meeting minutes from the meeting of November 16th, 2020, and the alcoholic beverage license application PH-20-AB-16 HEG LLC, and that's DBA Courtyard by Marriott, Alpharetta, Avalon, 11700 Amber Park Drive, Alpharetta, Georgia, 30009. Is there any council member who would like to remove anything from the consent agenda this evening? Seeing none, I'll call for a motion.
Motion to approve.
Second.
I have a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Mitchell and a second by Councilman Burnett. If there's no discussion on the consent agenda, I'll ask that all those in favor of the motion to approve the consent agenda, please vote yes, otherwise vote no. And it does pass unanimously. So that'll wrap up the consent agenda, and we'll move on to the public hearing item for this evening. The public hearing item is PH-20-17 North Point Trail Feasibility Study. Director Cook, I believe you have the floor.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. The first item is the North Point area and Alpha Loop Trail Connection Feasibility Study. Of course, we had a workshop a couple of weeks ago about this, but the 2018 North Point Activity Center LCI identifies green space trail connectivity as an area-wide initiative to enhance development and reinvestment in the North Point area through the creation of a system of connected multi-use trails and green spaces. And of course, in an effort to implement the initiative, the City Council authorized staff to seek grant funding to explore the feasibility of connecting the Alpha Loop to the Big Creek Greenway through the North Point area. The Atlanta Regional Commission awarded, did you move this? No, you're good. Okay. The Atlanta Regional Commission awarded the city $150,000 in LCI grant funds to complete a feasibility study. And the city had a commitment of 20% for the match. It's a plan connecting the Alpha Loop to the Big Creek Greenway, North Point Mall, and across Haynesbridge Road at the Georgia 400 interchange. Purpose, of course, is to improve the quality of life by connecting communities. The RFP was awarded to MKSK in November of 2019. And over the last 9 months, we actually started this in January, we have developed the study by engaging local residents, businesses, property owners, key stakeholders, and trail users throughout the planning process. And we actually had a really good turnout considering the pandemic. We had a lot of input from the public. As the Alpha Loop continues to take shape in the heart of Alpharetta, it's poised to provide significant economic and community benefit to the city and the region. And, currently we have a high-volume, widely spaced arterial road structure of North Point today, and the result is a limited route choice, extremely long blocks and poor walkability and bikeability. And so this study was to try to correct some of the issues, of course, that we found with the North Point area, and specifically to support walkable goals. And we're disconnected right now. Are we connected? So sorry, James, is this, can they see what I'm showing? Okay. All right, so I'll talk about some of the things that we looked at during the study. Of course, there's a lot of community assets that we looked at with the Morrison Lake, which is in Tech 360. How do you connect that to the future stormwater park that's at North Point, as well as the Big Creek Greenway? So a lot of community assets that exist, so there's a great opportunity when we started with this study. Also, canopy cover was considered. There's a significant amount of canopy cover around the Morrison Lake at Tech 360. You have the Georgia 400 buffer area, as well as along the south of Big Creek. I mean, there's a whole area beside of North Point where the car wash is located. Of course, the city owns a large piece of property there that can make that connection. And we'll give James a minute to see. I'm on? Okay, thank you. So here is the overall plan, and again, just to recap some of the assets that they looked at, what exists, the Morrison Lake, of course the Big Creek Greenway, future stormwater park. How do we make sure that we take advantage of all of those connections? And then just quickly to show you the canopy cover. When you think about this area, you think about a lot of the parking, a lot of the development, but there's actually is a significant area of canopy along 400, as well as the Greenway and the future of North Point. And of course, when they were putting the trail plan together, we looked at existing development to make sure that all of that is, the plans for Tech 360 as well as Northwood Summit, how all of that connects to each other, and then over to North Point and to the Big Creek Greenway. And I'm going to show you some of the focus areas, and we talked about some of this at the workshop, but specifically some of the issues that came up, and we had a lot of input from the residents and all of the stakeholders regarding the crossing that we talked about at the workshop at Haynes Bridge. So if people don't feel comfortable crossing Haynes Bridge, then connecting this part of the Alpha Loop over to North Point is going to be difficult if we can't make sure that people are comfortable with that connection. So when we went to the public, we actually proposed two different crossings. One of them is an at-grade crossing. And the at-grade crossing, and some people, some on council had mentioned why we didn't have the refuge area that would go to the middle. But our consultants had worked with GDOT, and they were not in favor of having that extended median here, so we won't be able to have that. So this configuration is very similar to what you have right now on Old Milton Parkway. So when you cross from Haynes Bridge over to Haynes, that's the configuration now that you have with the crosswalk. Of course, this has a much more of a protected area before you go over to the slip lane. And this was in order to make sure that we have ADA compliance. This is, if you're crossing here, you're able to go, it's a switchback in order to be able to get onto the lane. We're also proposing a tunnel. And the tunnel is non-ADA compliant, but a lot of the feedback we had from the public is that we had some that said they felt more comfortable in the tunnel, even though it's about 220 feet. And some liked the combination of both. So it may be, as we go through this concept, if it's approved, that in the future, when there's funding, that we would do the simpler at grade and then come back to the tunnel. So both of those are within the study. And then this area of focus also, it goes over to the Tech 360 lake. If you remember with the Tech 360 approvals, it did show the Alpha Loop down the center along the sidewalk through the development. This plan and, you know, the 9 months that were spent looking at where the correct location should be, the recommendation is that it's moved to this location, which is in the Georgia 400 buffer. There is an elevated area, that's the dark area, so that's a raised area. And there would still be plenty of connections to the lake, and this would still be part of the park, the public park system, not public park system, but public access. So this would still be part of the system. Then moving over to going towards Encore, there's an existing townhome development. We've already obtained the easements prior to construction in order to extend the loop to that section. That joins the next section, which is the area of focus 2. And on this section, there's actually the connection that is for the MARTA bus rapid transit station that would be in the middle of 400. So there would be a connection over to North Point Mall. And then the trail continues over to another elevated section and then ends at Encore. This is the Encore section. And this is one of the options. So this is when I talked about the at-grade crossing at Haynes, you know, there's a cheaper first option. This is kind of the cheaper first option. There's a wide lane that exists now for Encore, and there's a bike lane, so that could be reduced even further to have a separated bike lane. Because most of the residents that we talked to, they said they didn't feel comfortable on the bike lanes unless there was some type of a separation. So you'll see in some of the cost estimates that we'll talk about that there's this option, which is kind of the phase 1 option. And then this is a continuation. So the 8-foot sidewalk, which exists, and then this is just reconfiguring that lane. I think it's a 12-foot lane right now. And then there's 6 feet for bicycles right now. So this would just be adding that separation and having the 8-foot. Future. And so there's also, of course, a price in there for the desired condition. If there's reconstruction in the future, the recommendation is to just go to the 12-foot sidewalk, and that would be shared. So options, just offering options that would be in the plan for both of those. Also, this is at North Point Center East. So this is the entrance drive here, going into North Point, and if you remember, it's in the future plan for one of those lanes to be removed around the mall. So this would be the actual connection over to the mall, and the lane that would be removed, of course, would be for multi-use trail. So this is, again, the first step. Removing one of those lanes by just dedicating that for bicycles and pedestrians. And that could be, we could use planters or some other type of separation here. Again, it's a temporary, a much less cheaper option to try to start to have that system in place. And then also included is the final version. So if there is reconstruction, for instance, if the office buildings come back and they're adding something to this roadway, at that time, we would ask for that 12-foot sidewalk to be built going in to connect to the ring road. And then the final section, this is Area 3. So this is the last section that we looked at, and that's coming from North Point Center East over to what we call the Gateway Park, which would be the connection to the Big Creek Greenway. Again, with this one, I showed you the Encore Parkway. There's an option to just put the separated bike lane. That's the cheaper option, and then at some point in the future to come back and, of course, put in a 12-foot sidewalk along Encore. And then here's what the intersection would look like, which is shown as A. So this is actually where the car wash is located, and so this is the Gateway Park. And of course, we've applied for additional funding in order to get the final concept plan for that park. Also within this plan, they've included what the crosswalks could look like. You can see that they've included the required, the white striping, kind of the piano keys is what we call that, but they've also incorporated using the logo that's been developed for North Point. And the engineer that was part of this plan, he actually checked with Georgia DOT to make sure that that was something that was going to be acceptable. They were okay with that as long as it had these the piano key type designation also. And so those are the three areas. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer those at this time.
Councilman Burnett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Kathy, would you go back? It was one of your first slides we talked about with the tunnel or the at-grade crosswalk. I had a question for you. And it is with respect to GDOT and the median that they said they would not be in favor of. How much jurisdiction does the Georgia Department of Transportation have over a road that isn't theirs? And is it within a half mile of a state road? And why? That may be a Pete question.
I think it's going to be a Pete question. But I do know that they went back and forth because the original design had that refuge area included. But the concern was the left turn, that they changed, they reconfigured with the left turn. And when they did that, they said if this was too long here, that they couldn't make that turn. Our engineer also recommended that there's a possibility that we could move this back, the crossing, we could move it back here and then angle. So there's a little bit of work as they go through and design these improvements. But at this point, we had trouble getting approval for this. And Pete, I don't know if you can add.
I gave neither of you a heads up. I was going to ask that. So if you don't know, I understand. But
the easy rule of thumb is GDOT on Haynesbridge Road controls from ramp to ramp. So in this area, they would control basically we're a little bit past where it says truck apron in the upper left. Mm-hmm. They would have at least to that point because that is the entrance ramp to Georgia 400.
so are they just asking us for professional courtesy with respect to the crosswalk? Because that's crossing 8 lanes of traffic, and I said it the last time, if we're going to go above grade, that's a hell of a long way.
What needs to be shown or depicted is that if you had a tractor trailer making that left-hand turn movement, can it make that turning movement with that median coming through the crosswalk? So what they don't want is the tractor trailer to go through the median. So it has to be designed. I'm sure if it gets designed in such a fashion to not have that happen, that GDOT would be willing to work with us.
Thank you, Pete. Kathy, my other question for you was you have on red arrows with respect to the BRT pedestrian bridge, something of the like. Is the funding source for that going to be a combination between the penny we've always paid for MARTA or the Georgia Department of Transportation or some sort of thing we don't know about yet? I wanted to know who that bridge would belong to.
I don't have any knowledge of how that would be funded for this. I mean, it's not a city plan to fund. I don't know if that's what you're
I
asking.
didn't think so. I just didn't know if that was
Yeah.
something that we could sit there and say, we've never gotten anything for our penny. We want something now. So,
Yeah, so I don't think, it would not be part of this plan. It's just that we included it to show the location, just because it was important that we knew what GDOT was doing, what MARTA had planned to do, but it's not adopting that we would fund.
it's a great feature for the loop.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Councilman Heights.
Director Cook, I was talking with you offline a little bit ago about my concern over the segment from Encore to Haynes Bridge, which is the $6-point-some million segment.
Right here.
And you're basically showing it right there. And my concern is, I've never experienced yet, having been to Atlanta as early as 1978, where the expressways did not continue to get wider and wider, even when you think there's no way they can get wider. You know, and I was, telling you about King and Queen Tower down there in Sandy Springs. You thought that couldn't get any wider, and it gets wider. So I pulled up the expressway plans that GDOT has, and they're going to have 3 non-paying lanes each direction. Then there'll be the berm, and I guess they'll put up a wall, and on the other side of the wall will be $6 million worth of Alpha Loop. Do we know, or can we find out if GDOT has a 20-year plan for what would happen between Encore and Haynes Bridge as to whether or not they would encroach, take away that segment of the Alpha Loop? And I ask that question because as we're designing this and paying for the design of it, I'm just curious that we can keep our options open, such as behind the Artesian and south of Honda, coming off the lake towards Fanfare. So if it's on the books at 10 years from now, they're going to start tearing it up again, which would be consistent with everything I've ever known about the DOT. I'd like to know that.
Yeah, these plans are after, meeting several times with GDOT, so this is based on everything they have planned so far. So that's a good point, and I think that what we could do is add an option. I mean, I think that you had talked about that the option would be through this area and then connect to Maxwell Road. We already have an easement that we were given from the Artisan Townhomes. There's actually a small park back here, city park, so we already have this easement. So we could, although we don't have easements from this office building here, we could certainly show this as an alternate, possible alternate in case.
Over to Fanfare.
Yes, yeah.
And over.
I don't know that you would want that as your main trail, but that would be if that happened and you didn't have other options, then that would give you that option to go back through here.
Yes, thank you.
Councilman Binder.
Director Cook, I'm looking at the cost estimate,
Yes.
page 74, or 103 in our packet.
I brought up the total chart. Does that help or is that?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, is there, so I see that, so it kind of breaks it out in modules, but is there anything else in the document that helps us prioritize what we do next or what you'd like us to do next?
Well, I think it's the crossing and that section. Since we have a developer that's, they're finishing the summit. So we have residential that's getting built there. They have an office building that's built. They're going to have another office building.
Can you go back to the map to
Oh,
help
sure.
me point what?
Yes. So I think it's the crossing here at Haynes Bridge. Because we have construction, we have Northwind Summit that's under construction, we have development going on at the Morrison Lake. And this is what will tie, if we can tie it all over to North Point, I think that's the main section. And then secondly, we're still trying to get this concept plan here. We've also been very successful in obtaining most of the easements that would be needed for that future construction.
So, I'm at a balance here, because I'm excited about the loop. I'm excited about the talking and what we're gonna do, but eventually, you know, like, we gotta get to a point of seeing execution. So I'd love to see this added on or as part of it, to say, okay, this is the piece, these are the pieces that I want you to focus on, because it just seems like it's a great 30,000 view, or maybe a little bit lower, but just, we know money's pretty tight, and especially tight even now over this past year. So to say, you know, we're gonna, as Alpharetta, when we do things, we're gonna do it right. So
Sure.
obviously we cannot do this plan, right? I don't think it's gonna surprise anybody, but what part can we execute and do it in the quality that we expect? So I'd like to, I'm not seeing what the priority is in this document, and I don't think that's what this document was for. Maybe it was a feasibility study, so I don't know if that's a yes, no. Yes, it's feasible, great, what do we do now? But how do we hand off the baton to what do we do next? And I'm not seeing that in the resolution either. Like, I read each point on the resolution, it's backwards thinking. It's like, we did this, we did that, but what are we gonna do? And, you know, what should we focus on? So.
And that's a good point, but it also helps with planning when we adopt these plans. And for instance, you know, they're under construction right now, Tech 360, and they're getting ready to pull their permits. It changes what happens with their permitting if we don't want to adopt, you know, a plan that shows that this trail is actually moved over here within the buffer. Then that trail is going to be built down the middle of Tech 360, which we pay impact fee credits for it. But you know, after 9 months of having the public and the input and actually looking at the topography and how it all ties together, we were able to come up with this is probably a better location. So, you know, permit-wise, we've got somebody there. And then also, we just had the Felix School, and even though this was concept plan, we said, hey, you know, we're in the middle of doing this concept plan. It's not adopted yet, but they're building on this piece of property right here. And we were able to go to them and say, we have a concept plan that we need a better connection because there's going to be a trail system over here. So now they're building an 8-foot sidewalk, which would have been just the 5-foot sidewalk. So it helps us, even though it doesn't, like you said, we're not, you know, getting millions of it built, but it helps us with these little cases to guide people.
And that's definitely a great point to help keep me grounded on why are we talking about this whole pie? Because, you know, when the people do come in, like, hey, this is the part of the bigger picture. On the other hand, Councilmember Hypes brought up a great point of, you know, what's GDOC? We don't know what's going to happen in 10 years from time, so that piece will be gone. But it makes me feel better because if we have this study out to say, okay, what's our next goal? And a goal should be have a definite target that we can hit and a timeline. So we want to get G1 and G2 done by the next 5 years. How are we going to do it? And I think that gives us something to look towards and accomplish that I think would be beneficial to an area that drastically needs help and more people there. So what was that, G2? That's the west side and the other sheet, the two big purple, G1 and G2. I mean, if that's what we're saying moving on next, I'd love to have that kind of written down because
Sure.
What happens is we approve these plans. We say, well, you approved it. And I'm like, well, it was a big, you know, but I want to see this is what we're actually going to get done. So.
Right. And if, you know, I mean, there's options like we would apply for grant money. I mean, there's a possibility of a TAD. You were working on that at one time. But it also, like I said, it helps us with these little projects to make sure that we can show people a vision and then they can change their plan to make sure that it meets at least our concept plan for now. And, you know, just like if this was under construction right now, I think then I would have said this is probably our focus, try to get the bicycle lanes, put the temporary, take out one of the entrances into North Point. But right now, the heavy activity is here, so that's why I'm saying I think that's where I would focus.
I think that'd be a good thesis to write up and bring it to council and say everybody, to make sure everybody's on the same page. I'm just keep hitting that point. We all got to be on the same page. And I definitely understand and respect what you're saying on that section on G1, but a big part of our tax digest is in that area that's G2, and I'd like to keep playing chicken and the egg with it, waiting with North Point Mall to get going and for us to do some infrastructure changes.
Any other questions from council? Thank you, Ms. Cook.
Thank you. And there is,
I believe we need, do we have Stephen on? There we go. Stephen, if you don't mind, would you mind reading the resolution?
he's talking, but, yeah.
There you go, try again.
Now it still shows.
Muted? Oh, Stephen, you're muted on your end.
Can you hear me now?
Now we can.
Okay. Then thank you for bearing with us during these Zoom participation. And this is a resolution of the City Council of Alpharetta, Georgia, to adopt the North Point Area and Alpha Loop Trail Connectivity Feasibility Study. Whereas the North Point Activity Center Livable Centers Initiative LCI update was adopted by the City Council in 2018, and whereas the city was awarded $150,000 in LCI grant funding by the Atlanta Regional Commission in 2019 to convene a trail connectivity feasibility study for the North Point Activity Center LCI, and whereas the City Council awarded the North Point Area and Alpha Loop Trail Connectivity Feasibility Study to MKSK, and whereas MKSK, in conjunction with the city staff, led the planning process for the North Point Area and Alpha Loop Trail Connectivity Feasibility Study, which included implementation of a public participation plan, and now therefore be it resolved that the City Council of the City of Alpharetta hereby adopts the North Point Area and Alpha Loop Trail Connectivity Feasibility Study attached as Exhibit A. So resolved this 30th day of November 2020, the City of Alpharetta.
Thanks, sir. Ms. Cobb, do we have any public comment cards on this item?
We do not, sir.
But if anyone would like to come forward and speak on the North Point Trail feasibility study, now's your opportunity to do so. Seeing no one, we will close public comment. Do I have a motion from council?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I will offer a motion to approve PH-20-17 North Point Trail Feasibility Study, and the resolution is read by Mr. Jones.
Have a motion by Councilwoman Richard and a second by Mayor Pro Tem Mitchell. Any discussion? Councilwoman Richard.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. I mentioned this last, I guess, 2 weeks ago when we had the workshop. I think this is a fabulous comprehensive plan. 9 months of staff's work in MKSK and tool design. I think that I see it as a long-range plan, something that we can look at in phases, and I think funding is certainly a question, and I don't think we will be making decisions tonight about finding $21 million to implement this entire plan, but I think we have a document and a plan to work with moving forward with our partners, hopefully with the Alpha Loop Foundation, with private developers as we move forward and identify those priority areas and implement this plan over a particular time frame. So, Kathy, thanks for all your work and your team's work on this.
Thank you. Councilman Burnett.
I just wanted to, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to say, to echo a point that Councilmember Binder had made earlier, I think G2 for a section, if we had to pick one that we needed to go after first, knowing the challenges in a exponentially decreasing valuation area in North Point Mall is the most important piece of this. And I'd just say, plans are fabulous, but hope is not a strategy. And we get really, really good at moving food around the plate, and we got to quit. So it is time to figure out what we want to do and how we want to move forward and pick the projects that we need to do, because it's not getting more valuable over there. It's rotting, and it's starting to stink. Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Mitchell.
I think our history indicates that our best planning is done when the economy is in its challenging stages. We've proven that with City Center, with Avalon. It was proven earlier on with so many infrastructure projects. And so this overview, like you say, Ms. Cook, it allows you to look at development and when it's happening, and you can go ahead and execute that section. And we get it along and along. Without this kind of planning, we would be like other cities who fail to plan and they never execute very well. And I'm proud to be a part of a city that not only plans, but it executes and it sets strategic goals like Councilman Binder was mentioning. And it thinks about these things like Councilman Heights was talking about as far as the GDOT expansion. We think about these concepts and we execute them beautifully because we have plans like this and feasibility studies. So thank you for all your work and the department's work and all the partners that have worked with us. And I can't wait to see this evolve.
Councilman Heights.
I'm very excited about the Alpha Loop and all the public input that we've gotten and all the hard work and the meetings on site around Morrison Lake, et cetera. And I just want to keep in mind, in light of some of the observations by council, that, you know, projects of this size don't get built in 2 years. The Greenway did not get built in 2 years. The Greenway was started, you know, many years before its completion, and I remember when it got completed. I was living over on Park Bridge and rode my bike down there to start using the Greenway. And so in order to build something out, you've got to have these plans, you've got to have your direction. You don't eat an elephant in one bite, or, you know, you eat one bite at a time. You can't just swallow the whole elephant. And, you know, much to Mayor Pro Tem's point, you know, we've taken on some big projects, and we've got a guidepost here to follow. I have no doubt that we will prioritize, you know, these segments and section in light of what's going on, whether it's North Point Mall is taking off and needs a boost in that segment, or whether it's 360 Tech Village. But you can't get to the finish line until you take the first step, and to me this is a great first step. And so I'm excited about it. I think the Alpha Loop is an absolute game changer for the future of Alpharetta, and I campaigned on that. I believe that in my bones, and so I think this is an important evening to see these lines on a map about where this is going to take us. So I'm excited.
Councilman Binder.
I think it, you know, I appreciate staff's work on this. I appreciate previous Mayor Belle Isle working with you to announce this, and it is true. It's only been 3 years since I think he announced that, and we were all like, what are you talking about? Because it came as a surprise. But there should be nothing wrong, and I think I've been asking, is with the plan and what the objectives are, to say, what's the cost and what's our timeline on getting it? And I haven't heard what the timeline is. And so I know things aren't going to be built in 2 years, and I'm not expecting that, but I think it is expected to say what's the timeline we're looking at and how to prioritize. As a feasibility study, we already knew it was feasible, so it's great. So I would have liked to see something tonight been yes and. Yes, it is feasible, and this is how we're going to do it. And I hope you come back soon. And I know you will. I trust you. I know it's going to get done with you, Director Cook. It always does, and it's always phenomenal. So I hope you come back soon and say, this is our priority, and give give us our marching orders like you normally do. So we can say this is the big hits, you know, that we're going to take a chunk out of. And you're right, you need this document for when applicants come to you. And I totally understand that and respect that. But we need something to reach for because, yeah, we may have all campaigned on the Alpha Loop, but man, I don't want to look back and say, well, we submitted a great plan to the citizens of Alpharetta, because you can't walk on that.
Any other comments? That being said, all those in favor of the motion to approve PH-20-17 North Point Trail Feasibility Study as read in the resolution presented by Stephen Jones, not Sam Thomas. All those in favor, please vote yes. Otherwise, vote accordingly. And it does pass unanimously. And as we mentioned earlier, we'll be skipping over the only old business item that was on the agenda for this evening. So we'll begin the new business portion of tonight's meeting. First item on that will be the fiscal year 21 Public Safety Headquarters and Station 81 generator replacement. Director Sisevich, you have the floor.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Before you tonight are the generator replacements with public safety facilities. It was included in the FY21 capital budget. We do have a on-call vendor, Energy Systems Southeast, who maintains our generators, tests them, goes through the cycle every month to make sure everything's working well. They priced two fire station, police headquarters at $52,603, and Station 81 is $37,000 for a total of $89,603. The police headquarters also has 911 associated with it, so it's a much larger generator compared to just Fire Station 81. The biggest challenge with this project is the lead time is approximately 8 to 12 weeks for the generators to be delivered. And the additional funds left in the account, approximately just under $11,000, will go towards Atlanta Gas Light putting in the meters in for us for the gas service instead of it being a diesel generator. So, any questions?
Do we have any questions from council at this time? I only have one question, if could. I noticed that we retain old fire trucks and a future item to serve as a backup. Is there any value in retaining these as backup generators?
We've asked that part, and the biggest challenge, cost of putting the generators is actually running all electrical lines to the generator. Mm-hmm. And it is better to have a natural gas generator than a diesel due to the fuel costs. We have to drain them out every so often. So when we would need them, it would almost cost us more to get them into service than purchasing a smaller one for emergency needs.
Great, thank you. I knew you'd have the answer. Councilman Burnett.
So hypothetically, if you cut a natural gas line, what is the longevity of the generator until it runs out of? You said natural gas. I would assume that it's a line that gets run from a utility perspective based on your earlier comments. If that's cut and there's no power, your generator's not going to work.
That's correct. If the gas line is cut, it will come out immediately for us to service that line because it's a safety concern. Yeah. Much quicker than if we have a diesel fuel leak, which we've had.
Well, they happen. Thank you.
Any other questions from council? Thanks, sir. Mm-hmm. Ms. Cobb, do we have any public comment cards on this item?
We do not, sir.
But if anyone here would like to come forward and speak on the Public Safety Headquarters and Station 81 generator replacement, now is your chance to speak up. Seeing no one, we'll close public comment. Do I have a motion from council?
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to ask the council to please award the contract for generator replacements to Energy Systems Southeast, LLC, in an amount not to exceed $89,603, and authorize the mayor to execute all necessary documents. Approval of this requisition executes an expenditure as part of the FY 2021 capital budget.
We have a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Mitchell and a second by Councilman Merkel. Any discussion? Director, we appreciate you keeping these things running.
Thank you.
So if there's no other comments, Councilman Hypes? No pun intended, I'm sure. So we'll go ahead and call for a vote on the item, and that is the motion to please award the contract for generator replacements to Energy System Southeast LLC in amount not to exceed $89,603 and authorize the mayor to execute all necessary documents. All those in favor, please vote yes. Otherwise, vote no, and it does pass unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We appreciate it. Next one is also for Director Sisevich, and that's the fiscal year 2021 tree planting and landscape improvements.
So this is actually a pretty exciting one for us because it's going to be near the completion of the 2 roundabouts on Bethany. It's the last part of the project there. That is where the majority of the $153,241.53 is going to go towards. Also included are some replantings on West Side Parkway. Canton Street's going to get a tree where we did the mid-block crosswalk, as well as adding some shrubs and some additional landscaping where things have not survived throughout the city. Big component about this is watering. It is a large component. It is a 2-year watering cycle. And part of that cost is each tree will get watered the first 2 weeks daily. And then it turns into, after 6 months, 2 times per week. So they're bringing out the water truck for 2 full years for the trees and 1 full year for the shrubs. And Councilman Binder, as he knows, living along Rucker Road, that watering truck is quite large and services, so it does get expensive. But it is much less expensive for us to have the watering cycle compared to replacing the trees after 3 years or 4 years. It's a greater chance of survivability. So,
Any questions from council? Mayor Pro Tem Mitchell.
Mr. Sisevich, I know that with Rupert, we've had quite a year, not only with Public Works, but also Parks and Recreation, as far as them fulfilling their contract. And I know that they've made changes, but what assurances have they given you that this will not continue in the next year?
not to confuse the matter, Rupert doesn't maintain recreational parks. That is through a different vendor, but Rupert has been the one who installed all the landscaping and roundabouts on Rucker Road, as well as they did the Northfield streetscape, or frontage, park-like setting. So they have done extremely well for us along Rucker. And we have confidence in them, especially with their maintenance throughout the city and the right-of-ways. We got to keep up with them. They're just like any other vendor, but we've got great confidence they could.
So they weren't the ones handling the medians? I think they were.
Which medians?
On Main.
That was not their contract.
That was not them, okay. So they've not had any problems this last year?
I'm not going to say we haven't had challenges with that.
I'm not either.
We have
Yeah.
with all our vendors, there's an occasion here and there. We just keep up on them, and we make sure, and they've done a very good job for us on Rucker Road
Okay,
with the new installs.
thank you.
Any other questions from council? I don't think this is it certainly has nothing to do with this particular contract, but I do have a question that came to mind. One of the business owners in City Center had asked me about the plantings along Academy Street there, right where, I don't even remember which road that is. It crosses between Jekyll and
Okay.
Averance. Okay, where you come out there and there's no red light. Those plantings to your left, if you're facing out to Academy Street, kind of obstruct the view there.
So is this like Commerce Street or Market Street over there?
Like I said, I can't remember which one's Commerce and which one's Market. Between Amarantz and Jekyll Brewing, that exit onto Academy Street, facing the Baptist Church.
Okay.
When you're looking, because there's no light there, you have to look to your left to see if the oncoming traffic is coming. Those plantings, and I forget what it is off the top of my head. I did notice it after it was brought to my attention, maybe lower pedalums that are 3 or 4 feet tall or something like that. It really isn't conducive to safety for people that are trying to turn out of that, right or left, but especially left. Okay, so I mostly just say that because while we're planning and it's that time of year, it might be a good opportunity to take a look at that one because I do think it's a bit of a safety issue there.
Yep, we'll do.
Great, thank you, sir.
I have learned there's actually 2 varieties of lower pedalums. You could get a petite version, which we have on Encore Parkway.
Right.
And when you replace the wrong kind, then it does produce a safety hazard, so getting above.
And I'm not positive it was Laura Pelham, but it seems to me it was something like that, and you may be right, it may have been intended for the dwarf or something like that, but it's worth taking a look at while it's in planting season, because I don't think it would be terribly expensive to address that safety issue. But there are no other questions from council at this time? Thank you, sir.
I will like to clarify, the trees will get planted in January, February, and the shrubs will be sometime in late March, early April for the roundabout, so deal with the freezing.
Yeah, we've already got snow tonight, so. Ms. Cobb, do we have any public comment cards on this item?
We do not, sir.
But if anyone wants to come speak on these planning items, now's your chance to do so. Seeing no one, we'll close public comment. Do I have a motion from council?
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to ask the council to please award RFP 17103 to Rupert Landscape in an amount not to exceed $153,241.53 for the purchase, installation, and watering of trees and shrubs located at the Bethany roundabouts and other areas in the city, and authorize the mayor to execute all necessary documents.
Second.
Have a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Mitchell and a second by Councilwoman Richard. Motion was to award RFP 17-103 to Rupert Landscape in an amount not to exceed $153,241.53 for the purchase, installation, watering of trees and shrubs located at the Bethany roundabouts and other areas in the city, and authorize the mayor to execute all documents. All those in favor of that motion, please vote yes. Otherwise, vote no. And it does pass unanimously.
Thank you, Mayor Council.
Thank you, sir. Next item up will be Director Robinson, and that is for the Quint aerial ladder fire truck acquisition. I believe you brought back up.
I did. Good evening. So last January, if you recall, I shared with you about some developments in Milton. Of course, right now, we currently, our Station 81 shares an apparatus with Milton, but they've built a new public safety headquarters, and we'll be building a new Station 42, and so that apparatus will soon be leaving us, and we'll no longer have that partnership. We'll still have an overall partnership and agreement with them, but we won't be working together out of 81. So as I shared with you back in January, we were going to need to look at purchasing another apparatus as well as some additional personnel. So we're at the point now where we need to talk about the apparatus, which is going to be a Quint aerial ladder. And I've asked Chief McCullers to come and share about that. He is the project manager over this, and we'll be seeing this through for the next several months, including the personnel acquisition as well, and thought he would be more of an expert on the topic than I am regarding some of the specifics in case you had any questions. So, Chief McCullers.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This proposal kind of started several years ago, and I know Chief Robinson has been very supportive, as you have always been very supportive of our public safety department. City of Milton is in the process of rebuilding some stations, as Chief Robinson stated, and this ladder truck that they currently house at 81 would be moving in approximately 12 to 15 months. So the proposal we have before you tonight is really to enhance and truly maintain our superior level of service that we do provide to our citizens and our visitors and business owners here in Alpharetta. The Quint, I'm not sure if everybody knows what that verbiage is about, but it's an apparatus that has an aerial ladder, it has a pump, it has water, it has hose, and it has ground ladders. So that's where the terminology comes from. But we're going to be able to maintain our level of service with a Quint, but we're going to need that additional personnel, and we would also would be asking for in fiscal year 22 for a small rapid response apparatus as well that would augment or supplement the staffing needed for the Quint at the fire station where it would be located. Again, a Quint, the capabilities that we have, it can do the job of a pumper and of an aerial ladder, so we can take care of two things. Again, those additional personnel would be needed along with the apparatus so we can maintain our service level.
Any questions from council at this time? Councilman Burnett.
Chief McCullers and
Yes, sir.
Robinson, more of a Tom question. When you look under Section 3, it says budgeted item, yes. Included in current fiscal year capital budget, no. So I don't expect y'all to.
I'll let
Yeah, I just,
There's a-
because I remember having this conversation when we were going through the budget, and I believe the consensus was that this needs to happen, and I think it got left out when we approved our budget in July. So if you can explain that, or tell me I'm wrong, that's fine too.
This is the apparatus piece. What we did not budget is the personnel piece. We were debating back and forth about getting part of the personnel into this year's budget. We did not get that in. But as far as this, we don't specifically have a line item for the new Quint, but we have a lease payment we currently pay on the engine, the pumper. That is 10 years old. That lease ends. That pumper needs to go away. You're either going to replace that pumper or replace it with a Quint. So it is budgeted. There is a differential of $60,000. It goes from, let me see if I got, I think it's about $55,000 we're paying now, and it's going to go to $113,000.
Is it next year's?
Next year's budget, we'll have to pick that. There was no, so the question was answered, yes, that it is a budgeted lease payment. The concept is you are in the business of owning an engine or something that you need to pay for. So we're already in that business. It's just now going to be something that costs more because it's a Quint. It's a little bit more expensive, but it's budgeted. We'll have another $60,000 impact next year. That's it. So that's all this item has is a $60,000 impact next year. Not this year.
Just wanted to make sure you still worked here. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Any other questions from council? Well, gentlemen, I just want to thank both of you and your teams, as well as Director Harris's teams, because I do know you've been working on this for years. Long before I was mayor, y'all were already talking about this and thinking out of the box, because the easy thing for you and your crews would be to buy another ladder truck, hire people to run it, and just keep doing what you've been doing. But you didn't do that. You looked for ways to save our taxpayers money while still serving them even better. And so I appreciate the diligence on behalf of all of your teams, because I've been able to watch that firsthand, and it's pretty impressive. Thank you. Ms. Cobb, do we have any public comment cards at this time?
We do not, sir.
Don't we have a resolution on this? There's a resolution on this item.
There is. Do we have Stephen queued up?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a longer one than last time. This is the resolution authorizing directing officer of the city to execute one or more lease supplements for a lease or leases under the GMA direct leasing program, to designate such leases as qualified tax exempt obligations, to provide an effective date and for other purposes. Whereas the city has entered into a master lease, the master lease dated as of October 11th, 2000 with Georgia Municipal Association, Inc., for the leasing from time to time of certain equipment, machinery, or other personal property pursuant to supplemental leases. And whereas the city wishes to authorize the mayor to execute a lease supplement for the acquisition of a 10-8 aerial fire truck, now therefore be it resolved by the governing body of the city as follows: the mayor of the city is hereby authorized and directed to execute and deliver a supplemental lease pursuant to the master lease to put into effect one or more leases for 10-8 aerial fire truck. The leased property, said officer of the city is authorized and directed in the name of and on behalf of the city to execute and deliver one or more supplemental leases for items of the leased property and substantially the form attached to the master lease for such changes and additions as may be approved by said officer, and such other documents as may be deemed by such officer to be necessary or desirable to effect the purposes hereof or of the master lease, and such execution shall constitute conclusive evidence that the executed document has been authorized and approved hereby. The aforesaid officer is further authorized to do all things necessary or appropriate to effectuate the purposes hereof. An appropriation of the city's current operating budget has previously been made, which will be sufficient to pay the rentals and the term payment during the starting term under such lease supplements. The lease or leases contemplated by the said lease supplements are hereby designated qualified tax exempt obligations within the meaning of Section 265B3 of the Internal Revenue Code 1986 as amended, and said officers shall be authorized to confirm such designation by execution of appropriate documents in connection therewith. This authorization shall be effective immediately. So resolved, this day of November 2020. That is it.
Thanks, sir. Ms. Cobb, have we had any public comment cards come in the last minute?
No, sir, we have not.
But if anyone would like to come forward and speak on the aerial ladder truck acquisition, Quint aerial ladder truck, fire truck acquisition, now's your opportunity. Seeing no one, we'll close public comment. Do I have a motion from council?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I ask that the council approve this motion to acquire one Quint aerial ladder fire truck through 10 Fire Equipment of Georgia at a cost not to exceed $1,311,250, and to adopt the resolution for the lease as read by City Attorney Jones, also authorizing the mayor to execute the lease agreement and all associated documents with Truist Bank for the purpose of funding the Quint.
Have a motion by Councilman Hypes, a second by Councilman Merkel. Motion was to approve acquisition of one replacement fire engine with one Quint aerial ladder fire truck Pierce through 10-8 Fire Equipment of Georgia at a cost not to exceed $1,311,250, and adopt the resolution as read by City Attorney Stephen Jones, authorizing the mayor to execute a lease agreement and all associated documents with Truist Bank for the purposes of funding the Quint acquisition. Any discussion? I've said my piece earlier. So that being said, all in favor of the motion, please vote yes. Otherwise, vote no. And it does pass unanimously. Thank you very much. So the next item up will be more fun. It will be the renewal of the MOU with City of Johns Creek for baseball, softball, and lacrosse.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, Council. I'm here tonight to ask for renewal of the Memorandum of Understanding between the City of Alpharetta and the City of Johns Creek pertaining to recreational baseball, recreational softball, and recreational lacrosse. In 2016, the two cities decided that they would venture into a Parks Without Border type program, would allow residents from both cities to register in programs for recreational baseball, recreational lacrosse, and recreational softball at the resident fee. Since then, it has gone along very well. There's been an equal number of residents from both cities that have taken advantage of this. It basically allows the residents in our two cities to register for the program that's most convenient or closest to their homes. It is up for renewal at the end of this year. We have checked with both the Baseball Association and the Softball Association here in Alpharetta, and they're in favor of moving forward with this renewal. The only difference between this one and the last one is that this will be a 2-year memorandum of understanding as opposed to a 1-year memorandum of understanding. The City of Johns Creek has approved this at their last council meeting. They're about a week ahead of us from this. This item was reviewed by the Recreation Commission and voted unanimously to approve at their November 10th meeting as well. And if you look back at the numbers, we don't have many numbers for 2020 because we didn't have many programs in 2020. But if you look back at 2019, which is the last year that we have accurate numbers for, we had 246 residents of Alpharetta that went and registered for programs for Johns Creek, and we had 210 Johns Creek residents that came to our programs and registered. So it's a pretty even split as far as the number goes. Certainly be glad to answer any questions that you may have about this memorandum of understanding.
Any questions from council? Thank you, sir. It looks like you did a great job. Nobody has any questions from council. Ms. Cobb, do we have any public comment cards on this one?
We do not, sir.
But if anyone would like to come forward and speak on the rec programs MOU with Johns Creek, now's your chance. Seeing no one, we'll close public comment. Do I have a motion from council?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'd offer a motion tonight to for a renewal of the MOU with the City of Johns Creek for baseball, softball, and lacrosse as presented by Director Rogers here tonight.
Second.
Have a motion by Councilman Merkel, a second by Councilman Burnett. Any discussion? Councilman Burnett?
I would like to say thank you to the city of Johns Creek, who always recognizes how much value there are or is in having well-rounded partnerships. I'm grateful for them, that nobody gets the ego that's too bigger than the other, haves and have-nots syndrome. I'm grateful that there are still cities out there that value our contribution to their residents. Thank you.
Councilman Merkel? Anyone else? Well, I will take a little bit of an offense that you actually noted Johns Creek got ahead of us on something and passed this before we did. Did you have a comment, Mayor Pro Tem Mitchell?
No, I'm just enjoying this.
Well, Director Rogers does insist on fun. That being said, if there's no other comments, I'll call for vote on the motion that was to approve the renewal of the MOU with Johns Creek Memorandum of Understanding pertaining to recreational youth baseball, recreational youth softball, and recreational youth lacrosse for a period of 2 years. All those in favor, please vote. And it does pass unanimously. Thank you, Director Rogers. Next item up under new business will be the Vulnerable Population Grant Program Award Recommendation. Director Harris, you have that. He didn't put his name on the agenda.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Before you this evening is an item authorizing a vulnerable population grant to Ed Isaacson YMCA for $20,082. You may recall that the mayor and council, you set aside 10% of the County CARES Act dollars, which reimbursement, which was $2.8 million. So you set aside $280,000 for this vulnerable population grant program. At the last meeting, a couple meetings back, I guess, maybe 5 nonprofits received funding, about $225,000. If this item is approved, it will leave approximately 34,000, so I'm just close to 35,000 after this. YMC is providing child care and learning support for Alpharetta residents. With that, that's it.
Any questions from council on this item? Thanks, sir. Ms. Cobb, do we have any public comment cards?
We do not, sir.
But if anyone would like to come forward and speak on this item, now's your chance. Seeing no one, we'll close public comment. Do I have a motion from council?
Mr. Mayor, I move that we approve and award the Alpharetta Vulnerable Population Grant Funds in an amount not to exceed $20,082 to the Alpharetta Ed Isaacson YMCA as presented, and authorize the mayor to execute all necessary documents.
Second.
We have a motion by Councilman Binder, a second by Councilwoman Richard. All those, or do you have any discussion items on this item? Councilman Binder.
Again, staff did an incredible job. I'm continue to be amazed and with their consistency, just to go above and beyond during this time. I think it's very important that we treat everyone as a community, and this has gone a long way in doing that. So heartfelt thank you to staff and for council for moving forward with this.
Any other discussion? That being said, then we'll close discussion and vote on the motion which was to approve the award of Alpharetta Vulnerable Population Grant Funds in an amount not to exceed $20,082 to the Alpharetta Ed Isaacson YMCA is presented and authorized the mayor to execute all necessary documents. All those in favor vote yes, otherwise vote no, and it does pass unanimously. So, ladies and gentlemen, that will bring us near the end of our agenda for this evening, but if you are a member of the public and would like to come forward at this time, and voice your opinions. Now's your chance to do so. Seeing no one, we'll close public comment. Any reports from council? Councilman Ives.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm very pleased to announce tonight that my appointment to the Cultural Arts Commission is Ms. Sabina Genet. So she has gratefully accepted, and she'll do a great job, and she'll be, once the board gets formed, she'll be on the commission.
Thank you, sir. Any other reports from council? Hearing none. Ladies and gentlemen, we appreciate you fighting the sleet and ice to get here this evening. Look forward to seeing you at the next meeting. This is adjourned.